All right, good evening. 6:30, I'm going to call the order meeting 1841 of the East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission. We are located at the Town Hall, 11 Rice Street, Broadbrook, and we're also available on the Zoom platform. We have a quorum. We have 4 regular members plus 1 alternate. Frank, did you have the opportunity to read through the minutes and bring yourself up to speed?
Yes, I did.
So I'd ask that you be a voting member this evening.
Okay.
Thank you. Do we have any added agenda items?
We do not.
We do not. Okay. There was no legal notice. So public participation. This is for any item that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak on a different matter that's not on the agenda tonight? Is there anyone online that would like to speak on a matter that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. Approval of minutes. We have our minutes from our previous meeting, 1840, held on December 13th. Does anybody have any additions, corrections, alterations to the minutes?
I read them, even though I was absent, I read them, so I cannot have any additions.
Okay. Well, good. Everybody else is good?
I was good.
All right, if we have no corrections, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of special meeting 1840 held December 13th. It was as review minutes are presented.
Hey, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
I think I saw Dave Britzel. Seconded by Dave. Any discussions? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
I abstained, I was absent.
Okay, Peg, so we have 4 ayes and Frank abstained because he was not present. Okay. Receipt of applications. We have 1 new application. It is for PZ 2022-28, 15 Kreisig Road, a special use permit for a dog daycare, dog grooming service. The applicant is Kimberly Lance. This will be heard at a future meeting. Okay, moving on. Nothing under performance bonds, actions, permits, road acceptance. Okay, continued public hearing. PZ 2022-26, 115 Scandic Road, special use permit for event hosting. The applicant is East Windsor Historical Society. Who's to speak on the applicant's behalf?
For the record, J.R. Russo and Associates here representing the East Windsor Historical Society with regard to this application for a special use permit for an event facility. Also here this evening with me is my partner, Tim Kuhn, professional engineer here in Connecticut, who was involved with the design of this project. And we'll talk to you a little bit later on with regard to the drainage. Also, Scott Hesketh is here, our traffic engineer from F.A. Hesketh and Associates. He will be speaking as well with regard to a revision to the traffic study to address some of the concerns, I think, of one of the members of the commission. Lori DiBattista, our architect and structural engineer, is also here again this evening. She's going to talk to you a little bit about the insulation that's going into the building and sound and noise levels and so forth. There was some questions about that. And John Burnham and Carl Landolina are not here, and they both are on Zoom, I believe. They were both not able to attend the meeting. So with that said, I think what I'd like to do right now in terms of a little bit of housekeeping is we do have some revisions We've got a revised plan set, which I will submit now for the record. Very minor changes, and I'm going to go over those with you. We also have a revised traffic report, which I'm going to submit for the record. We have a driveway sightline plan that we will be submitting for the record. If you recall, there was some discussion about sightlines. I think Attorney Needleman brought it up, and maybe one of the neighbors, I think, talked about sightline and the fact that the sightlines on Cemetery Road are inadequate and not safe. So we have addressed that. There was some discussion about turning, on-site turning with regard to trucks, fire trucks, and so forth. I think the fire marshal had a couple of questions, may have been in his memo, so we are submitting as well truck turning movement plans for a box truck, an SU-30, entering and exit, as well as a fire truck turning map that shows the warehouse point ladder truck. It's a 95-foot Pierce truck that shows how that navigates in and out of the site. There was also, I think, some questions about site lighting. I have got cut sheets for parking lot lighting and the ornamental lighting on the driveways. Those are part of this submission. And there was some questions about what types of events could happen here. So we're going to give you tonight some possible events that could take place here, as well as a sample rental agreement that the society is looking at in terms of how they can structure theirs. And this is one from the town of Randy for a facility they have that's similar to this. So all of that said, this is a transmittal sheet. This is a revised plan set, which I will submit for the record. The revised plan set has also been submitted digitally, and we'll be able to look at that tonight. And I have copies of a lot of the other information for you that I'll pass out as we start to go through the info that we have here. So first off, with regard to the plan set, there was some discussion brought up by Attorney Needleman, and I think a comment that may have been in the planner's report, if I remember correctly, with regard to the landscaping and the screening. Your regulations require screening in the form of a solid fence and staggered evergreens along the side facing the residential use. We had shown you a berm and evergreens planted on the berm. We have added as a revision, which is in this plan set, a solid fence, a 6-foot board fence, and staggered evergreen plantings at 10 foot on center, which I think is what your regulation speaks to. That has been added to the plan and is shown in the revised set that you have there this evening. Also, one change in the plan was with regard to an additional note. Attorney Needleman brought up the drainage easement across the neighbor's property, across the Schultz property. And the plan said proposed drainage easement, and probably on that sheet right there, Ruth, I think there's a note added, although I can't see it from here, but there is an existing drainage easement there, so we referenced the map. We cited the map, the reference map, as well as the volume and page where the drainage easement appears. So it is an existing drainage easement. Much of the drainage actually that's on the site has gone there and existed there for decades. It was installed by the former owner, Dave Tyler, some of it for his own use, some of it for the society, and some of it probably goes back 25 years or more. That existing drainage is not part of our system. We're not designing and incorporating it into our system. It's going to continue to flow through as it does today. And my partner, Tim Kuhn, is going to talk to you a little bit about that. But there is an easement. It is documented and it is filed in the land records in terms of a map and indeed into the Schultz's, and that's noted on the plan. So we'll get that out of the way early, I think. So those items are shown, I think, going on now. I'd like to talk a little bit about the POCD and your approval criteria for your special permit. Attorney Needleman talked quite a bit about that, and I think he may have said that although he agreed with the POCD and agreed with the approval criteria, as I had spoken about them, we tend to disagree maybe a little bit on how we are addressing it and whether we conform or we don't conform. And one of the things that Attorney Needleman said more than once was with regard to the POCD. And I think what he said was that the plan, or that the commission, we must conform to the POCD. And I'm not sure where he got that, or where he came up with that specific language. But I think if you look at your regulations, what it's going to tell you is that your POCD is a guidance document, and it's there for you to rely on in terms of what the town is thinking is the right way to go with a particular development or in this area, and this happens to be one of the village districts. And we talked about that a little bit at the last meeting, and he kept continually, I think, using the word must. And I handed out a piece of the POCD to you at the last meeting, and we talked about it. And we still think that we are meeting the POCD and what's shown in the POCD. And I'm going to go through it again and talk a little bit about it. In chapter 2, it talks about conserving community resources and preserving more open space. And it's our opinion that this project will allow the Historical Society to stay in that location and continue to do the things that they've done over the past 50 to 60 years. This is an opportunity to them to create a venue where they can get a little bit of income, to continue to support their efforts to maintain the open space in the agricultural area on the property they now own, and to continue to do the things that they do in the community in terms of preserving the historical nature and being able to bring different buildings and so forth to the property and preserve them so that they're preserving the history of East Windsor in terms of its culture and its agricultural background. It talks also a little bit about protecting the environmental quality. And I think Attorney Needleman might have said that we're going to pollute the Scannick River. I think that was the exact term that he used. I don't agree with that. I don't know why he even said that. We have a drainage system here that conforms to all the requirements. It's been designed by a professional engineer. It's been reviewed by your town engineer, who is a professional engineer, and it works and it functions. And it's no different than many of the drainage systems that this commission has approved in the past that we have designed. So we don't agree with his comment that we're going to pollute the Scannick River. It's absolutely untrue. In continuing through the POCD, we get to the primary strategy where it talks about the different villages, one of them being Scannick, and it says they need to establish village plans for each of these areas with architectural guidelines, lot requirements, preserve the historic character, preserve the rural agricultural character, enhance the architectural character. Well, we're taking an existing building, which is a prefabricated metal building, and we're going to change the use, but we're also going to turn it into a building that looks more like a barn. And if we look at the rendering up there, I think we would all agree, compared to what it is today, a metal skinned building with a metal roof, this is a big improvement over what it currently is, which certainly meets enhancing the architectural character of the village of Skeeling, and we think that we're doing that. We're also preserving that historic nature by keeping the agriculture, keeping the farmlands, and preserving that rural agricultural character. So we feel that we meet the primary strategy within the village area. Again, with this, it allows the historical commission to continue their work and preserve the historic resources of the town of East Windsor with the approval of this facility, and also continue to preserve the view shed and the natural resources. One of the things that I didn't talk about at the last meeting, and I think it's important to note, is that this property now has substantial frontage on the Scannick River. And many of you on this commission are probably aware, and I don't know how many people sitting here in the audience know, but the Scannick River and the Scannick River corridor is something that has been a project of the town of South Windsor, East Windsor, Enfield, and Summers for probably 40 some odd years, or maybe longer, I'm not sure. I know it's been there as long as I can remember, and I've been in this town for approaching 50 years in terms of some of the work that we've done here. And it's basically involving the development of a linear park from the mouth of the Scannick River at the Connecticut River all the way up to the Massachusetts border. And a lot of that has been accomplished. There's a lot of lands that have been purchased. There's easements, and it's to provide access to the river. The Historical Society now owns substantial frontage on the Scannick River, preserving and helping to enhance that linear park, if you will, allowing access to the river, which was once private property, but it no longer is. It's now part of this Historical Society, and there is access to the river, and again, further implements that linear park that has been under development probably now for at least 40 years, maybe longer. So I think overall, in conclusion, that in terms of the POCD, that this application meets the goals and the objectives of the plan of conservation and development. And that's really the first thing that you need to look at in terms of looking at your special permit approval criteria, because the first thing that it talks about when we go in and look at that is the plan of conservation and development. Does the proposal meet the POCD? And we believe it does. And I think when you read through it and take a look at it, that you would probably agree with me. Again, it does meet the POCD. In looking further through the regulations, and again, in the special permit findings, it goes on and goes further. And it talks about, once we get through that POCD, and the section that probably right in 701.1, where it says that you're supposed to take a look at the POCD and that the proposed use is in general accordance, is the word, with the relevant provisions of the plan of conservation and development. And certainly we think we are in general accordance with the POCD. So we go on and we continue down looking through the approval criteria. And I've got a lot of information here, and I wish this little podium was about 4 times the size that it is.
Smarter glasses.
Let's see.
So let's move through. I'll try to get through this a little quicker because I've gone through it all before, but I just wanted to reiterate it because I know Attorney Needleman is was not agreeing with what we were talking about. I'm not sure about the omission, but I think it's important to go through it again. So again, in terms of 7011, accordance with the plan of conservation development, we believe we are in accordance. In terms of 7012, and I think you probably all have the little guide that your staff put together, which is a wonderful tool, and I think it helps us a lot in order to try to determine what we're really looking at here with all the different things. Harmony with the area, so if the proposed use of such a location, size, and character that is in general, it will be in harmony with the appropriate orderly development of the area in which is proposed and will not be detrimental to the orderly development of adjacent properties. Well, certainly we don't think that we're causing any issue in terms of development of any adjacent properties. We think that it is of such a size and location. In terms of size, it's an existing building. We're not building something new. This building's already there. The location is already there. We're not changing that. We're enhancing the building architecturally, but we're not changing the size of the building. We believe it is in harmony with the orderly development of the area, and it will not be detrimental to orderly development of adjacent properties. In B, it says that the kind, size, location, height of the structure, and nature and extent of the landscaping on the lot will not hinder or discourage the appropriate use of adjoining property or diminish the value thereof. So again, the size, height, and location of the structure, existing structure, we're not changing it, we're not making it any bigger, we're enhancing it architecturally, and certainly we think it's in keeping with the area. The landscaping, as I spoke of earlier, has been modified slightly to meet your regulation. We are offering screening, fencing, and a number of evergreen trees in order to screen the area between us and the properties to the west. In terms of diminishing property values, it's our opinion that this will not diminish any property values. In fact, those of you who are maybe familiar with this property going back 5, 6, 7 years, back 10, 15, 20 years. And if you ever went back and looked at the area that we're talking about right now, you would remember that it was basically a bit of a mess. There was stuff everywhere, dilapidated equipment, broken down equipment. And the society, since they took title to this property, has taken out tons and tons and tons and tons of junk in roll-off containers and have spent tens of thousands of dollars in cleanup costs to get rid of all the junk that was left on this particular property. One of the things that Attorney Needleman talked about was the fact that our parking area was taking up essentially what he was calling agricultural land. We were losing ag land for a parking lot. Well, the reality is that our parking lot was a dump. And if you go back and look at some historical photos, you'll see that. There was dilapidated construction and farm equipment all over the area to the east of the buildings, the existing farm buildings where our parking lot is going. So it was never agricultural land. It was an area that required substantial cleanup, which they did. So again, we don't feel that we're diminishing property values. In fact, with the work that's been done so far, we probably have enhanced property values in the area. Section C of 701.2 says the proposed use will not alter the essential characteristics or adversely affect property values in the neighborhood. So now we're not talking about adjacent, we're talking about the neighborhood. So I think it would be fair to say that somebody that lives a mile down the road on Scannick Road or half a mile down the road on Phelps Road, excuse me, down the end of the cemetery road at the bottom of the hill, that what we're doing has no effect. I can't imagine. I know people are going to disagree with that, but I think the reality is that we can all agree that somebody that lives half a mile, quarter mile, or a mile away from this is not going to be affected by this use. And one of the things that they talked about a lot was traffic, and Scott Hesketh is going to talk about. 701.3 talks about adequate access. I've already talked about that a little bit. We have sufficient information that we've submitted to you that shows that there is adequate access for emergency vehicles, box trucks that might be coming there for deliveries, for catering trucks. And again, Scott's going to talk about that. Adequate infrastructure in terms of water supply, sewage disposal, stormwater drainage systems. Tim's going to talk about the stormwater drainage system with you a little more. Mr. Needleman seems to think that our system is inadequate, not properly designed, which is totally untrue. And Tim Keene, my partner, is going to talk to you about that. We have a sewage disposal system. It was approved by your WPCA, so we are certainly in conformance in terms of adequate infrastructure. We have power. We will have a generator. We will have a fire suppression system for this building. Well, he's going to talk a little bit about that. So we do have adequate infrastructure. We meet the criteria. Natural resource conservation 701.5. The proposed plans are provided for the conservation of natural features, drainage basins, and protection of the environment in the area. Well, I know Eternal Nealman said we were going to pollute the Scannick River, which again isn't true. Our design certainly meets the criteria for providing stormwater management through the wet basin. And we are protecting the environment. They're going to preserve the farmlands. And we now have, as I had mentioned earlier, substantial frontage on the Scannick River, which we hope to preserve in perpetuity here with this plan and the future doings of the historical society. 701.6 talks about compatible design, that the design elements of the proposed development are attractive. Well, again, if you look at the rendering up here, certainly it's more attractive than the metal skin building that's there today. And we think it's in keeping with the agricultural nature of the town of East Windsor in this particular area. Suitable in relation to site characteristics and style of other buildings in the immediate area, again, certainly is suitable in relation to characteristics of other buildings in the area. And appropriate with the overall character of the community as outlined in the PLCD. We already talked about that. And certainly we meet that. 701.7 talks about public health, safety, and welfare. Certainly in terms of public health, we have sanitary sewer, we have water, we have a storm drainage system. We believe that everything we have here does protect the public health. In terms of public health, safety, welfare, convenience, and property values. One of the things that came up when we were talking about this in this section was what types of events. I'm going to give you some of that information later. And again, in terms of property values, we think if anything with the work we've done here so far and what we will do in the future will probably enhance the property values to the immediate adjacent neighbors. Residential impacts, that's 701.8. Talks about that in the case of any use located in or directly adjacent to a residential zone. Well, we're talking about these things as if we were directly adjacent to a residential zone, but the reality is we're not. The neighbors directly to the west of us are all zone business. It's a B1 zone. So it's not a residential zone, but we're treating it as if it is. That the proposed use of proposed activities will not hinder or discourage appropriate use or development of adjacent land. We don't think there's anything that we're doing here is going to hinder or prohibit the development of any adjacent land and or impair the value thereof after considering that. Again, we don't think we're going to affect the values of those neighbors. You need to look at the location and size of the proposed use. When the location is existing, the building is existing. The size we talked about, we're going to talk about the number of people that may come here and what the proposed uses might be. We also need to look at site layout in relation to access and the proposed streets. And again, we've showed you that, and Scott Hesketh is going to talk a little bit more about that. 701.9 is a traffic impact study. You have that. We submitted a revised one tonight. And Scott is going to talk to you about that. So that gets through your approval criteria in relation to your special permit uses. And again, we believe that we do meet all of these, and I gotta believe that I think you would probably agree with me. I know the neighbors are not, or at least most of them. And I'm sure that Attorney Needleman is not, but we'll see where that goes. So with that said, I think what I'd like to do now is hand out to you some of these other materials that I've got here. So that as Scott moves forward and we move forward, you'll have these to reference. So what Tim has for you, there are some sightline plans as well as traffic turning plans within the site, which was discussed. And I'm gonna let Scott talk a little more about that. What I've got here is some proposed potential uses, some hours of operation, the sample rental agreement that they're looking at, that they may model theirs after. We have one, but I'll give you another. And what I also have here is the cut sheets on the site lighting.
Quick question, Jay. How come this stuff wasn't given to us earlier? Instead of night in the meeting? An awful lot to take in in 20 minutes.
Well, some of the information with regard to questions that came up. We did submit the plan set, obviously. We had comments back from the fire marshal. We've addressed those. The specifics on the site lighting is called out. I'm not sure if the cut sheets were submitted. I think there's details on the plan, but I think what we really want to talk about is full cutoff or not full cutoff.
Traffic report.
The traffic report was submitted. It has been revised. We had it for the first meeting. Okay, and it was, I think, reviewed by your town engineer, and I think he commented on it. The drainage report was all submitted at the first meeting, and the town engineer commented on that. The only thing that I may be giving you new here is some turning radius information because of some questions that came up. The cut sheets, I'm not sure whether they were submitted or not, but I know somebody asked that question. And in terms of possible events, there was some comments on this. We had some on the actual application, I believe, the first time, but there's some more information here for you.
It seems to me, Jay, with all the information you've given us, that you obviously got to give us some time to go through this information before we can make a decision. So I would suspect, I would hope you don't expect to get a decision tonight.
I absolutely do not expect a decision tonight.
I just want to make that clear.
And that was honestly, and maybe I could have said that before I started. I'm assuming and intending that this hearing is going to remain open. It's going to get extended to your next meeting. I had no thought that you would probably close the hearing or make a decision. There's a lot of information here. You got a lot of information at the last meeting.
It appears to me, from what I read in the minutes, that you have addressed the question that I would have asked you.
Well, we like to think we've addressed the question, so I guess with that said. Why don't I just go through some of these things a little bit? And the traffic report, I'm gonna let Scott talk about that. The drainage, I'm gonna let Tim Kuhn talk about that. The turning templates which you have there were with regard to questions raised by the fire marshal. And I think again by Attorney Needleman, who apparently is a fireman, and indicated that he didn't think any fire apparatus could get through the site. The site light sheets we have, and we have given you, and a list of possible events here, as well as a sample of rental agreement. So I guess with that said, let me have Tim Kuhn come up and talk to you about the storm drainage. And if you have any questions with regard to that, certainly Tim can answer them, but I think once he finishes, I don't think there'll be any issues with return in terms of the questions that Attorney Needleman brought up at the last meeting.
Good evening, Tim Kuhn with J.R. Russo and Associates, partner and professional engineer here in the state of Connecticut. Apparently, at the last meeting, Attorney Needleman implied that our drainage study and road drainage system were flawed. And I guess the reason was because we did not include the offsite area on the opposite side of Scantic Road in our study. And the area he's referring to, it's Scantic Road down here to the south, is a field over here. And there are a couple of drainage structures here as well. And he implied that these should have been included in our drainage study in order for us to make our system work. The first, I'd just like to say that we don't really even know if these structures are connected to our system. There's some piping that comes out of these structures headed in this direction. There's some piping that this structure that comes from that direction, but we've run across no mapping, no actual evidence that states that there is a connection. It can only be assumed one way or the other.
Well, there's a catch basin there, isn't there? And that's all flooded right now if you drive by there.
Yes. There's a catch basin here. When we looked in it, we didn't see any outlet pipe. There's a catch basin over here. There's a 6-inch pipe that heads in this direction. There's a 6-inch pipe that comes into this one. Again, don't know if they're connected. They very well could be connected. But we don't have any mapping to verify that. Regardless. And more importantly, even if it is connected, this is an area that's unchanged by our development. That's first thing. It's unchanged by our development, and it comes, if it is connected, it comes through the existing drainage system along the southern portion of our property. It's essentially a bypass flow because we're not doing anything, which actually shows more on our proposed post-development drainage study. Our activity is moved to the north. We're collecting all the runoff with our new drainage system to the north, sending it off to our stormwater treatment base. The only thing we're really doing that has any impact to this line to the south is we're actually removing some of the area that drains to it. So in fact, we're going to be reducing the amount of stormwater from our site that flows to that flow line. And anything here, this is going to be the same, whether it's pre-development or post-development, is going to continue to flow through that pipe. And now it'll have even a better chance of flowing through that pipe because we've reduced the runoff that comes from it from our pipe. So because it was going to an isolated system, because it's an area that's unchanged and it doesn't impact our proposed drainage system, it doesn't go into our basin. That's why it was excluded from the drainage. Typically, when you have large areas that are just floating bypass and remain unchanged, you don't have to include those in the drainage report because they don't have an impact. That's the case here. Just to reiterate what Jay said, we're not going to be polluting the Scantic River. You know, all the runoff from the impervious areas is collected and discharged to a stormwater treatment basin The basin is a wet basin designed in accordance with the Connecticut Stormwater Quality Guidelines. It's a primary, an accepted primary treatment practice by the DEP. And it's been designed in accordance with their guidelines to provide treatment so that we're not polluting downstream. It's also designed to provide intention so that there are no flooding impacts downstream. And we've submitted our drainage report, which was reviewed by the town engineer and approved. So, with regard to the drainage, that's all I have to say. I'd be happy to answer any questions. And back over to Jay unless there are any.
Again, for the record, Jay Urson, J.R. Russo. One of the other things I'd like to add here. In terms of the drainage, one of the things that Attorney Needleman brought up was the fact that we should be infiltrating our stormwater back into the ground, that we shouldn't be paving everything, and that we should have more gravel. And the reason that we're not doing that is because, quite frankly, you'd have a better chance of infiltrating water through that desk in front of you than through the ground that's out here. It's heavy soil, it's clay, it's probably a type and C or a D soil. Yeah.
Reports in C.
C. So it's a C soil. So essentially it has a very high runoff coefficient. So most of the water that hits the ground here runs off of it. It doesn't go back into the ground because we've essentially got impervious soils. So trying to put a type surface in here, which we've all heard of pervious pavers, impervious pavement, that's not going to work here. This isn't the type of site that would allow that type of surface and be able to promote us putting water back into the ground. It's just not going to work because the soils here are very heavy clay type soils. So I just wanted to add that in terms of one of the questions that came up that Attorney Needleman brought up the last meeting. So with that said, I think I'd like Scott Heskett to come up and talk to you a little bit more about the traffic report and what he's done since the last meeting.
Good evening. For the record, Scott Heskett, licensed engineer in the state of Connecticut, firm of F.A. Heskett and Associates, in our office in East Granby, Connecticut. I'm the author of the November 7th, 2022 traffic impact report, which has been submitted previously. And in response to questions from the commission and the public during the last public hearing, we went out and did a little additional research. There's a memo dated December 22nd, 2022, which is, I believe, before you this evening. One of the questions which was asked was, we had produced our traffic report based on 2019 CONDOT traffic volumes. And several of the commission members wondered why we used 2019 counts, why we didn't conduct any new counts. Well, the Connecticut Department of Transportation does counts on all state highways and some local roadways. They do so on a 3-year rotating basis. So the latest traffic volume counts for this area were conducted back in 2019. If you review the 2019 counts from CONDOT, it indicates that traffic volumes on the local roadways have basically remained unchanged since about 2011 through 2019. The average daily traffic volumes are the same or within 100 vehicles over that 8 or 9 year period. So in the last couple of years, we've been in the COVID situation, so the traffic volumes currently are probably the same or probably less than the 2019 counts conducted by CONDOT. Based on that, those two factors, we thought 2019 traffic volumes were more than appropriate for analysis of this particular development. However, based on the commission's comments, we did go out and install new traffic counters out on Cemetery Road and on Route 191 over a 3-day period after our last meeting. And we did confirm that the traffic volumes currently existing are very similar to the traffic volumes observed during 2019. There are copies of those counts provided in the 2020, the December 12th, 22nd memo, which we provided to you. The traffic volumes were observed to be on Route 191. We observed an average daily traffic volume of 2,172 vehicles. Cemetery Road had an average daily traffic volume of 1,931. And the peak hour volumes were measured at 252 and 217 vehicles, respectively. And again, those volumes are very similar to 2019 volumes, which our report is based on. In addition to that, since we were out installing traffic volume counters, we decided to do a manual turning movement count at the intersection of Scantic Road and Cemetery Road during the afternoon peak commuter period to get the turning movements through that intersection. And so that we could do a capacity analysis of that intersection during the afternoon peak hour, pre and post development conditions. Copies of the data from that are provided in our memo to you for your review. But the capacity analysis for the intersection indicate that all movements at that location operate at a level service A during peak hours under both the background and combined traffic volume conditions, which means the average vehicular delay for all vehicles moving through the intersection are 10 seconds or less during the afternoon peak hour. And background and combined traffic volume conditions. So we're pretty confident that our traffic report from November 7th is accurately reflects the traffic volumes occurring in the area. That's been verified by the recent counts, and the levels of service are excellent at this location under the combined traffic volume conditions. There's some questions regarding accident data and the number of accidents which occurred at the intersection of Route 191 and Trombley Road. I believe that was what you're referring to. Again, we mentioned last time that we had there were 5 accidents on Trombley Road in our previous report. We went back and took a more detailed look at the accident data. There were 4 accidents which occurred at the intersection itself. But none of them seem to, you mentioned perhaps intersection site distance difficulties there. Our review of the intersection of that location indicated there are no site distance limitations. There were 4 accidents at the intersection, but there was 1 accident in a private driveway located on Trombley Road farther down. There is site distance limitation at the intersection of Scantic Road and Cemetery Road due to the presence of the church on the corner. But that intersection is an all-way stop sign controlled intersection. And I'm sure it's a 4-way stop sign controlled intersection for the express purpose of that site distance limitation. A review of the accident data indicated that there was 1 accident at that particular location over the last 3-year period. And again, we put copies of the accident figures or diagrams in the December 22nd report for your, so you can take a look at and review the specifics of those particular accidents. There was a question as to whether there was enough parking on site. It's my understanding that there are 88 parking spaces provided on site, and that exceeds the parking regulations for the town. So by definition, there is sufficient parking on the site for this particular use. And the question where the site was the site designed to accommodate truck deliveries? Turning movement diagrams or truck turning movement diagrams have been presented to you, which provided the SU-30 design vehicle. That's the largest vehicle we do anticipate at the site. It would probably be for picking up of garbage. It'll probably be there once a week. We don't expect many deliveries to the facility, as most deliveries would probably be by caterers who tend to use smaller cargo type vans in order to make deliveries. Things that'll be used at the facility likely be tables and chairs, and they'll be delivered once. When the facility is after it's constructed, tables and chairs will be on site for use of whoever's renting the facility. So that type of delivery would occur once, and then we would only have the trash deliveries or pickups once a week after the facility is open. It's my understanding you also have a turning movement diagram for the fire apparatus, which I believe is the largest fire apparatus used by the town. I think the diagrams do demonstrate that the fire truck can get into and out of the site and navigate through the site without hitting any of the parked vehicles. And if they happen to be on site during such an event, so that should satisfy you in terms of that. There was questions about the types of events would be there, craft fair, open events, and how do we regulate 250 guests? Shay has given you a list of the types of facilities which may or may not occur here. Any types of facility, I assume that under approval of this commission tonight would limit guests to 250. Any type of events which would have more guests than that, I suppose could still get approval through the under section 405 of the zoning regulations, temporary permit for seasonal events, and as they have done on site in the past, whether they had this particular building to utilize or not. There's questions about the width of Cemetery Road. Our report indicated that Cemetery Road was 22 feet in width. A member of the public indicated that they spoke to town staff and were told it was 20 feet. We did go out and have our people from our office take measurements at 5 different utility poles in the area. At one point, we did measure 20.5 feet. At one point, we measured 21.1 feet. The other 3 locations, we measured 22.6 feet in width. So, yes, I represented 22 feet. Those are the measurements that I took out in the field and confirmed by our office that 3 out of the 5 of the measurements exceeded 22 feet in width. Intersection site distance. We indicated that there was an excess of 450 feet of site distance looking left out of our site driveway. Again, we had our people go out and remeasure it in the field. Intersection site distance is measured at a height of eye of 3.5 feet to an object approaching at 3.5 feet. You have to be able to see that object from the length of the site distance to the site driveway. Our measurements again at 10 feet behind the existing curb line. We measured 500 feet of site distance, looking to the left from our proposed site driveway location. And looking to the right, you can see to the intersection of Scantic Road. I believe the intersection site plan you showed shows 388 feet. That's to the stop bar location on our site on Cemetery Road. You can see into and probably across the intersection, probably as much as 425 or 440 feet. The 500-foot site distance does meet the 85th percentile speed of the roadway. And to verify that, when we did our counts, we also took speed measurements with our tubes. So we were able to measure the 85th percentile speed of the roadway, which an 85th percentile speed is the speed at which 85% of the traffic goes below that speed. So 15% of the vehicles exceed that speed. And in engineering, we go for the 85th percentile because you can't design for the highest speed vehicle. There's always some idiot out there. If we design parking lots, we design for the 85th busiest day. We don't want to put 10,000 parking spaces when 85% of the time you only need 800 parking spaces. Same thing with site distance. Someone's always going to be exceeding the limit. But the 85th percentile speeds were measured 38 miles per hour and 39 miles per hour on Cemetery Road in the vicinity of the site driveway. And the 500-foot site distance is appropriate for an approach speed of 50 miles per hour. And again, looking to the right to the intersection, although we have 388 feet of site distance, the site distance in that location is effectively 0 because any vehicle approaching from that direction approaches from an all stop condition. Therefore, their speed when they're observed is 0 miles per hour. They would have to accelerate to that 38 miles per hour. But if someone is pulling out of the driveway, they would certainly have an opportunity to see them and adjust. So we believe that the proposed driveway location has sufficient intersection site distance. I believe those were the questions related to traffic, which had come up at the last meeting. I believe the December 22nd memo adequately addresses those questions, comments, and concerns. And again, I did not find anything in our new observations which would indicate that the existing roadway network is not capable of accommodating the traffic volumes that are anticipated from this particular development. If the Commission has any specific questions or public brings up any additional items, I will be here the remainder of the evening. I'll be happy to address them at the appropriate time.
I'll wait.
Do you want to?
I have one quick question. On your proposed sightline, it shows, at least on your drawing here, that you're looking through some trees.
There are some trees across the site frontage. If they're deemed to be in the way, they can be taken down. They are within the right of way and they are across the site frontage of our development.
So they'd have to be taken down.
They may have to be taken down, yeah. If there's, we look at shrubberies, tend to block site distance. If it's a flowering tree which has a 4 or 6 inch trunk and the flowering is above 3.5 feet, it's not necessary to remove that tree. As a person sitting in a vehicle can look in front and behind that particular tree. So
You're talking at 3.5 feet above ground level.
3.5 feet above ground level is the eye level of a driver sitting in their vehicle. And they have to be able to see a vehicle at 3.5 feet. So shrubberies would have to be in the way. I don't believe there's any shrubberies out there. I believe the trees, of the vegetation that you're looking at on the plan are the flowering trees with a smaller trunk and a canopy above 3.5 feet height. So I believe that the ones out there in the field are acceptable, with the exception of one shrubbery, which is located between the 2 existing site driveways, would likely have to come down. Might be 2, yeah. And those will likely be replaced with other shrubberies back behind the right of way in terms of the planting plants.
Actually, if I could just comment a little bit on that myself, J.R. Russo. I asked the same question that Commissioner Gowdy just asked, and what was the plan? And we then take a look on the computer and look at it at full scale and blow it up so we can really see. So we're looking at the 80 scale plan, and the actuality is that there's nothing here that obstructs the sightline. These trees are a little further back than what it looks like when you're looking at the 80 scale plan. So it really is, there is no vegetation that's in the way. The sightline is all
This is 180, 1 to 80.
80, correct.
So I have a couple of questions. We did not get that new revised traffic study. That
Came in with the packet.
Packets that came to us.
we didn't get them.
No, the one that Jay just.
Just presented.
Just 2 minutes. Okay, so that's why we couldn't
Yeah.
review it. And I noticed that the trippers were put out there, I think on a Wednesday, Thursday, and a Friday on a holiday week.
They were Wednesday, Thursday, Friday after the last public hearing. It was not a holiday week.
Well, it's leading up to a holiday week, I should say. So the counts are gonna be low anyways. So I like to compare the new packet to the old packet, just to double check everything, which we just reviewed tonight.
The counts were consistent with all counts in the area over the last 10 years.
Okay.
So
Yeah, we did do it.
Okay. So my next question was, parking in the facility, you said it was adequate, but we didn't, I mentioned last meeting, we didn't bring up anything about employee parking. It's supposed to be 30 spots for employees. There's nothing on the plans that show that.
I believe the parking spaces on the plan meet with town's regulations for this particular type of use.
For guests.
I don't believe the parking regulations specify employees and guests. I believe they specify.
Well, there's a 250 count, 3 cars per 80 spaces per.
So I guess then the MAC occupancy would include also any kind of service staff too, not just guests.
I believe that's, I'm hearing architect, yes.
Okay, so it's not just. The 250 is
Yeah, I think so.
everybody in the building, not just. yeah.
Regulations, these types of facilities are generally written as occupancy divided by 3. And then if you have, like, if employees have their own vehicle, they, so you tend to be, parking tends to be a little better, yes. Yes, we meet the regulations, so therefore there should be sufficient parking, that's correct.
Oh, yeah.
Anyone else?
I think it would be much more useful if you would say, you think there should be. You said this, you think there should be sufficient parking. Well, is there or isn't there? I mean, it seems to me that people are listening to you,
It's my personal belief there'll be enough parking as we meet the regulations.
but you can't say there positively is.
I can't say that positively is.
Or it can't.
I say we meet the
That's
regulations.
a problem when you're presenting an argument or a discussion with someone. At least in my opinion.
Well, I think the plans meet the regulations and therefore there's sufficient parking. That's what I would say.
You'd say there is sufficient parking.
I think that's what I was trying to say several times.
Don't try, I want to hear you say that because it makes a big difference to me.
Yeah, there's sufficient parking.
One of the questions I raised last time was the calculations for parking and traffic and everything is based on a controlled known number of vehicles. So some of these events that you have proposed here would be open to the public. you have no control or no way of knowing how many people from the public would attend such an event. So how do you do parking and traffic calculations based on that?
We've done parking, we've done the trip generation calculations based on the occupancy.
Right, so a public event, say like a farmer's market. You have no idea how many people are gonna show up at an event like that. Are you gonna have somebody counting heads and turning cars away? I mean, when you get to a certain point, you get maximum saturation, you run out of parking spots. When you home to ice cream socials, people park across the street, they park in the field, there's all kinds of additional places that people park because of the turnout. So again, based on what you proposed for uses, there's events that you can control the number of people. And there's events you cannot control the amount of people unless you put some kind of stringent head count requirements and have people turned away.
I'll let the people operating the facility tell you how they're gonna do that control, and then we'll come back and talk to you about the calculations going on with them.
Okay. Very good.
To continue what Mike was talking about, so car and motorcycle shows. I actually attend those and I have a trailer that hauls my old cars and hauls my motorcycles. I don't see any mention of where that truck that's hauling that spare trailer to that car show is gonna park, turn around. If you're bringing 50 or 100 people that are bringing a car into a car show, where do they park? Across the street? Across the street in the field that's.
I'll let them answer that, and then
Okay,
I can talk to you about the traffic.
Yeah.
Do in a moment, so.
just curious about the traffic. You're having that many people coming down the road. Your traffic count is based on cars. Now we're adding trailers involved and it's more traffic on the road. It's more people trying to navigate things. More turning around radius, lots of more people backing up on that road trying to turn in. Did we factor that? I guess my question, did we factor people hauling trailers into these car shows, to these motorcycle shows?
And then a question?
This may not be for you, but associated with the parking, and the answer may be in the plans that were submitted that we haven't seen. I asked the question about EV chargers and if you'd considered that. That's still on the table for me. It may be on the plans and I just don't know.
For the record, again, JR Russo. Just to back up a little bit, talk about the parking numbers. When the zoning regulations indicated the parking requirement for a certain number of people, the parking requirement includes employees and people that it takes to run the facility. So in this particular case, where we're talking about 250 and it requires the 80 some odd spaces, well, that includes staff folks, staff people. Total occupants of the building is 250 people. In this particular case, if the commission is uncomfortable, we have the ability to add more spaces. We don't feel that we need them for the use that we're proposing based on what's required in the regulation. But there is ample area where we first pull in off of Cemetery Road where we could very easily add 18 to 20 more spaces. And if the commission is comfortable with that, uncomfortable with the number, we certainly can add more spaces. That's not an issue. In terms of looking at events that may be more than 250 people, what we're asking you for here and what's in our application is an application to run a facility that has the occupancy of 250 people in total. And we provided parking for that. As Scott actually pointed out in his traffic report, you have in your regulations, which is what the commission uses when they have their ice cream social, is in section 405 is a temporary permit. So they can go to the zoning office and you've seen other people come here. I know Frank certainly has, and I think Jim has, and probably Mike has, and probably Ann has. Sorry, Dave, maybe I haven't been here long enough, but
No.
where different folks have come in for a temporary permit to run an event that may have a larger capacity of people. They do it here for their ice cream social. I know in years past, when the Broadbrook Fire Department has their carnival up at the end of Main Street, I think you've seen them here asking for a temporary permit to run that event. That's what that is for. This application is for this facility to run these events with a 250 person occupancy. You asked for a possible list. We gave it to you. There's things on there that they've done there before. The ice cream social is one of them, and they do get the temporary permit to do that.
So your job is just to meet the requirements.
We need to meet the requirement of that 250 occupancy. If there's something that's on that list that may involve more people than that, then we need to deal with it in a different way. I'm not so sure, to be honest, and Mike mentioned the farmer's market, which I'm assuming here would be inside the building. I don't know that there would ever be more than maybe 150 or 200 people there at any given time. I'm not sure of that. I've been to a number of them. The only one that I can honestly say I've been to where I was amazed at the number of people was the one out in Coventry. And I don't know what they call it, and I don't even know who runs it. But that one draws a tremendous crowd. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there, and they don't have any parking. They don't have enough parking. They park in a field and they park down the road. That's the only one I can honestly say I've been to where I've seen probably over 250 people. I've been to the one in Ellington where I live numerous times. I don't know that there's ever more than 200 or 250 people there at any given time. But I will say they run theirs a little differently. They have entertainment there every time they have a farmer's market. They might have a two-piece band. They may have somebody else. I know they have a gal that comes in with hawks and eagles and so forth that gives a discussion. So there's other things going on. In terms of the EV charging station, we certainly can add that in. That's a simple thing. We would probably put it up to the closest space closest to the building, so it would be easy to wire it. So that's not an issue that we can add it. In terms of different types of car shows, Dave, to address that, that's something I guess we need to think about. I'm kind of a car guy. I've been to a few car shows, but I've never seen any cars come in on trailers, but I'm sure you're right. I'm sure they do on motorcycles. I guess I can understand that would happen. So you asked for a possible list. We're giving you, these are possible things, whether they all would happen there or not, I don't know, but we're looking for 250 occupancy level for this building, and we feel we've given you a site plan that conforms to those requirements. So that's kind of where that sits. Unless there's more questions for Scott, or Scott has more to add, which, so looking at it, it looks like, all right, maybe we'll wait.
Would respond to more.
I'd like Lori DeBattista to come up and talk to you a little bit about the building, the insulation, sound. We talked a little bit about noise at the last meeting, and there is a little bit of information on your sheets that I handed out to you with regard to hours of operation and so forth, and we can discuss that a little further. Which we need to.
Thanks, Jay. For the record, I'm Lori DiBattista from DiBattista Associates. I'm a registered architect, structural engineer in the state of Connecticut. I'm not going to say in this corner, so I want to talk a little bit about some of the stuff we're going to do for noise. But there was a couple other items that were addressed at the last meeting. I'd like to give you some support information on. One is on the sprinkler system. The sprinkler system under the NFP 13. When you have a well system, you need a holding tank. So based on the hazard of the building, you may have cars in it. There's certain criteria placed on to what sizing of the tank is relative to how big the building is, how many folks are in it, and et cetera, et cetera. So as you heard before, we're going to have an emergency generator site. The holding tank will be held into this building here, and also will be a heated area. So the tank will not be underground, it has to be in a heated space with a fire pump that will pump up to the building, and that will cover the building. So there will be no any drain on the on the existing well system. So there's no issue with drinking water. There was a question regarding the separation between the building, our closest building wall to the residential structure. And according to the code, the fire separation with no fire rated exterior wall system is 30 feet. We have 70.5 or 0.6 feet to the actual property line. And then 79.6. I'm dyslexic, I read it up there.
It's hard to see this one.
As well. So well within that fire separation distance for, that's to the property line. And the requirement is to the building, so we will exceed that separation between buildings, to adjacent lots. Regarding the sound, we spoke at the last meeting that we're going to use foam insulation on the exterior walls to control sound. And with the concern that was addressed, we're actually going to build two walls. There'll be two walls around the system. So what it will be is our metal sheeting that will have outside strippings to it, and then we'll have a new wood shape that would give you that farm look. That'll have an air gap in it. Then going inside, there'll be another 2x6 wall with some foam in it to meet the insulation requirement of energy. Then we use block wool for fill up the remaining cavity. Then there's 2 inches in between that wall, and then we build another wood wall with wood rock wool insulation. And that basically gives you over, sound is measured in dB level. And the higher the number, the higher the ability for that wall to reduce the sound going through it. So our exterior wall will be rated at 100 dB. So when you have a 100 dB wall or an STC rating, that basically it will not allow 100 dB going through the wall. So we feel that that will increase the comfort with our surrounding neighbors, and reducing any of the load, especially the noise from music that will be held inside. May I answer any questions for us? Yes, ma'am.
In the presentation last time, there was conversation about the patio and leaving the doors to the patio open. When the doors are open or the activity is out on the patio, what's the noise at the property line from that?
I'm sorry.
0.
Well, basically, when we have music on the patio itself, and it's behind it, this is actually blocking it. The structure is actually blocking it. And in addition, we have a 6-foot berm here, and then we have another 6-foot solid fence. It's very similar to what we see on Route 91, with the residential houses. Against the 91 highway, they have those sounding berms.
What about, there's a house set way back, kind of behind the cemetery? Schultz.
Oh, it's way back there. They definitely will get some noise, but noise dissipates as it goes across, with distance. And additionally, depending on the terrain, whether it has trees, cars, it definitely will reduce it.
I guess I'm concerned about the, I'll say decibels at the property line, to make sure we're not causing a noise harm to that particular house.
A rock and roll band, a loud rock and roll band, when you're sitting 2 or 3 rows in front of them, is about 100 to 120 dB level. And as you further get away, it falls. My understanding, the commission hasn't set that dB level. So, with distance, we definitely could run calculations and take sounding measurements and determine that. So I can address that at the next meeting.
Okay, in other applications where we were concerned with noise, we've applied the standards of the state noise regs at the property line.
Okay, so that's 55 dB during the day and 45 at night.
Something like that. It's the state noise regs at the property.
No, I got them. I use them all the time.
Well, what about at the park? They hold concerts in the park.
We're not in a public discussion at this point. Are you part of the presentation?
I can address that at that level.
Thank
for
you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other questions? Thank you.
Again, for the record, J.R. Russo. Just a couple of more comments with regard to the noise levels and the use of the building. Just so we're all clear that the existing barn and the renovation of the barn, which is located here on the plan set, there is no activity proposed on this side. These are the existing residences that are closest. Again, property lines about 80 feet away. Buildings are further. There are no doors, no windows on that side of the building, and there is no activity proposed on that side of the building. There is no activity proposed here on the north side of the building, and essentially none here on the south side of the building. There is a patio here, which is shown here in the rendering, which is on the east side, and the Schultz property. I haven't measured it exactly, but it's a few hundred feet away, and I understand your question and your concern. And I think the simple answer is if there is a band or a DJ playing within the facility, the doors are closed. And I think that would solve the issues in terms of what the needs, hundreds of feet away to that property line. But as Lori has indicated, she's gonna take a look at that for you, and we'll get those answers for you, but.
Here's my concern, like on the backside, like on the backside of that property. It's like a loud car going by, all the windows are closed, you're you're gonna hear thud. All day, all night long.
Just so you, let's talk a little bit about that, that's a good question. We've been involved in some of this before, and some of them have been before you. In this commission in terms of noise and what we have to do in terms of mitigation when we have these issues. And generally what we find is, and this happened on RCPC over on Apothecary Saw Road that's owned by the Holden family, where they were crushing and so on and so forth and processing material. It happened with us on another project where we had a transfer station where they were processing material and so forth, where they were abutting a residential zone. So in both those cases, we went out and did, and we had an acoustical engineer that was hired. I'm not sure who was on the commission then, maybe you remember, maybe you don't, but the background levels that we took in all those cases before any of these facilities were ever running exceeded the allowable levels of 55 dB during the day. Because a car going by on the street exceeds that level. Probably me talking to you right now exceeds that level. So when Lori DiBattista is telling you we're going to build a double wall, we're going to build a double wall because that's what we have to do in order to meet that level outside between us and the residential uses. Over at RCPC, the existing traffic on the road exceeded the level. The gun club across the street certainly exceeded the level. And what exceeds the level continually in those types of operations, including the transfer station, are the trucks and the backup alarms. Although they are exempt from any kind of noise situation, but they far exceed any of the noise levels. So 55 dB is nearly quiet. It's very quiet. And we are going to build quite a wall to meet that regulation, but we can do that. We know what we have to do in order to do it. So it's not like this, I don't think it's new to us. It's not new. It can be done and we will do it. And if we can't, then it's a matter of, okay, you got to turn the music down. You can only play it at such a level for us to be. But so we know, so I wanted to talk a little bit about that because a lot of people don't know what 55 decibels is, and it's not much. It's very quiet in most cases. Background noise exceeds it. Certainly a car going by, like Jim had said, with the stereo up and loud is above the allowable level. So I just wanted to make that point. So with that said, unless the commission has any other questions from any of us at this particular point, I think we have any more to add. Scott, you're good for now.
I'll respond, yeah, more questions.
And if any more questions come up, certainly we can respond, but at this point, I think that concludes our presentation.
Okay, Jay, I have one other question to ask for you. So in our regs, in section 300, or chapter 3, general provisions.
Yep.
There's a section here that says special permits, uses permitted under this section in residential and agricultural zones shall comply with the bulk area requirements of the B2 zone district. B2 zone requires 100 feet setback. How do you?
What was that number again, please?
It's right below section 304. It says special use, special permit uses permitted under this section in residential and agricultural zones shall comply with the bulk and area requirements for a B2 zone district. Or you don't have to formulate an answer now, but that's something you have to take a look at.
I think we did. Section 300.
It's after 304, after G.
Very end, Dr. G.
Okay, Jay, I'm gonna move on.
We did look at that. And you think it's a typo? To be honest. I'm not sure if this really doesn't make any sense.
Okay, as a,
But we'll continue to look at it and see if we can come up with an answer for you, but we did look at it and scratched our heads, and I think so did your staff, as to what does that mean?
you know what it means to me if you're in an agricultural zone. And now this is now going to uses. If you're gonna now become a business type use next to a residential type use, you have to meet the setback requirements of a B2. Take a look at it.
Well, no, let's just back up one second.
Okay.
Again, Jay Ursu for the record. So we're reading in section 304 that says uses permitted in any zone. And it goes through and it talks about specific uses, municipal, public places, worship, federal, state facilities, public utility facilities, private clubs, recreational uses, farms. And then it says permitted special permit uses under this section. Well, it's talking about section 304. That's not where we fall.
G is farm regulations. You're asking for a special under the farm regulation. That's item G in this section.
All right, we'll have to further review it. I'm not sure that I agree with that, but
I got another question on top of that. Last meeting I asked, what's to stop this from happening in other A1 zones across the town, from the property that sides?
that's a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. I meant to address that. Again, Jay Ursu, J.R. Russo for the record. Back in 2010 and 2011. This commission, and Jim, I think you were here, I know Frank was, Ian may have been, Mike might have been, Dave wasn't, sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to pick on you again. But you adopted a set of farm regulations. And during that time frame, there were months and months and months of public meetings where the public was invited to come out and comment. I was at many of those meetings. And there was a public hearing when those regulations were adopted. And in those regulations, you came up with a number of permitted uses and special permit uses, one of which was the event hosting facility. And what's to prevent this from happening in any other zone? Well, your regulations allow it.
Any other parcel in town?
If it meets the farm
If you
regulation,
do for one, you do for all.
if it meets the, well, no, that's not true, because it's a special permit, so the commission has a lot of latitude as to what they can do. So what you do for one is not what you do for all. I don't agree with that. But your regulation, your farm regulation allows this use. And you went through it, and after many, many, many months of meetings and discussion and a public hearing, you adopted this regulation, and these things could be allowed in any zone on another farm. Not on any piece of property. not on any A1 piece of property or A2 piece of property. That doesn't mean it's a farm. If I own 25 acres up on Depot Street and it's vacant land, that doesn't mean it's a farm. This land is farm. They have a lease with a farmer, a long-term lease to continue to farm this piece of property. So you need to be a farm and you need to prove that you're a farm in order to come in under this regulation, but could it happen on another farm? Yeah, it could. But what you do for one is not what you do for all. Every special permit application is reviewed individually. It has its own set of circumstances. And that's a very difficult job that you have in order to look at all those circumstances and make the right decision as to what you're going to allow on a particular application on a particular piece of property. But yes, it could happen somewhere else.
So in East Windsor, there's more farms in East Windsor than probably any other town around. Us.
I'm not sure that
There's
is
quite a bit, looks like Suffield, a lot.
That's true. There are, but it could happen somewhere else.
That's all I have.
No other questions? So this is a public hearing. I'm gonna open it up to the public now. I might go first. Good evening. I'm attorney Scott Lingenfelter. I'm with Mark Needleman's office. I'm here tonight as he's out of the country, representing the interest of the Boberts and several other neighbors to this property. A little bit of background about me. I've been practicing law for approximately 20 years now. And I also spent 4 years serving as the first selectman in the town of Suffield. I've represented the town of Suffield on special matters as an attorney. And I've worked with Attorney Needleman on several matters for the town of Bloomfield. I'm currently the East Granby town attorney. At the last meeting, Attorney Needleman addressed many concerns regarding this proposal. And I don't want to reiterate all those concerns tonight, because you don't need to hear them over and over. But I do want to highlight some that come to mind and address some of the new things raised tonight. One of the most concerning things to me is that these changes came in last minute for all of us, for you, for the neighbors, for us in preparing to respond to this tonight. We get a chance to review the plans. I'm happy to hear what the applicant said they want this public hearing continued, so that you guys can review what was said tonight, so that we can review and provide any further feedback. I did hear something tonight that I've never heard in a zoning hearing before, which I did my best not to chuckle at. But when a setback is ignored, the applicant actually said it was a typo in the regs. That's something I've never heard in my life. 100-foot setback, it's clearly in the regs, referred to as a typo. I'd like to focus on, this is a special permit, and it does not conform with the plan of conservation development for the town of East Windsor. One of the essential elements of plan of conservation development is to preserve farmland and farming. This is creating a party venue. This is a venue that's going to be hosting parties and major events. This is not a farming activity. And they're going to be paving a significant portion of this property to provide for, in my opinion, less than adequate parking already for the venue that's there. And what's the long-term plan for this? If you look at their plans, they have several notes of utility capped for future expansion. Throughout their documents, they have capped for future expansion. This is going to keep growing and growing and growing. That's clearly their plan based on what's put before us. Also, the plan of conservation and development says that it is to protect rivers and streams and groundwater resources. And while they may have said that the clay there is not permeable, clay is much more permeable than pavement is. So as we pave more and more land with more and more cars being parked on there, that's creating significantly different runoff of the water across the land. And let's remember those cars, those 88 cars or so that they're referencing, will leak oil, gas, they'll salt coming off the road. All that's going to be going onto that land and draining towards the Skagit River. Now, we had looked at the previous drainage report and it, in our opinion, did not adequately meet the requirements. Now, they talked today about the property across the street. on how there's possibly catch basins there that may run through the property. They weren't sure, but they said they did not take that into consideration because it was a run through. I think it's important when you do a drainage report that you take into consideration all the water that's gonna be running through the property to see where it's going and how it's gonna be permeating through that property. And they've not done that. They've said today. They didn't do that. They didn't consider that. They don't know if it runs through the property, they said. But we need to know that. We need to know where that water across the street is coming from, how it's getting there. As well as the property neighboring it, the Schultz property, where they previously had proposed easement for water drainage. Now they say it's an actual easement that's on the land records. We need to look that up because we've seen nothing on that easement. And we need to see where that additional water is going if there's draining it onto a neighbor's property. We have some additional pictures tonight. That we could pass out to the commission. It's set for a record and for all the commission members. Oh, we one short. One short. No, no, we won't be one short. Oh, okay. That's all right. It was discussed a few weeks back, how close the neighbors' properties were to this event facility. And tonight it was discussed some more that it was 79 feet from the property line. Those pictures help put this in perspective. The properties with the white fence are from Rich Bevan's property, the brown fence are Gail Bovert's property. You can see how close those residences are to this event facility. There's gonna be cars driving between that blue barn and these properties. People walking back there. They're gonna be hanging out, smoking and drinking back there most likely as they hang out at that facility. All less than 80 feet from the property line of these neighbors behind them. I coach a lot of baseball. 80 feet is less than the distance between two bases on a baseball diamond. You take that in perspective, that's how close it's gonna be to these neighboring properties. Some of these pictures I provided to you also show some of the lack of drainage across the street. That's the property across the street that is continually filling up with water. And adding this special use permit and allowing this to go forward is going to create more funneling across the street and around there. The water's gonna have less and less place. Yeah. We talked about the noise levels coming from this event facility. And we talked about how 3 walls are gonna be soundproofed, and then the back wall, they call it the back wall, in respect to the neighbors that are 80 feet away, will have those screen doors. So they said will have to be closed if they're playing music. Who's gonna monitor that? We know they're not gonna be closed. There's gonna be music blaring from that. We also talked about the, I believe it was 55 dB as the number that was kind of standard, and that cars driving by create even more than that. Look at the plans. Cars gonna be driving between the event facility and the neighboring properties less than 80 feet away. The noise is gonna be excessive. We've got 88 plus cars late at night driving in and out of there. That's gonna be excessive noise. including those neighbors' properties. We also continue to have concerns regarding the amount of parking spaces at the facility. Talked about 88 spaces being enough for the 250 guests in the facility. Well, if they have events that have outdoor seating possibly, people not within the facility, what says they can't exceed 250 people there? 250 people live within the building, but we're offering a special use permit for them to hold these events. And it could be more than 250 people there. So now we're gonna need more parking area for those people. Not to mention, when you look at the plans, some of those parking spaces are right in front of things such as the dumpster, where the dumpsters belong. You can't park in front of the dumpster. Also, when you read the fire marshal's report, there was questions regarding the turnaround radius for the fire truck in certain areas and how it had to be extended to allow for the fire apparatus to turn to 26 feet. Well, some of those areas where he highlighted as being the turning area are where they also have parking spaces. Those parking spaces, while maybe look good on a piece of paper, are not realistic. Also, when you think about a facility like this, there needs to be a loading area for them to load and unload equipment, supplies, food, whatnot. That is also right where parking is being considered. Those are not adequate parking spaces. We also are extremely concerned still regarding the amount of traffic that's going to be created as a result of this event facility. An additional 250 people is going to bring quite a bit of traffic to those streets. But they're very narrow streets, often late at night, as they host weddings and other things. And that's going to be dangerous, not just for the patrons of this facility, but also the neighbors and others that live in the community driving through these streets. These are narrow, dangerous streets, and Attorney Newman at the last meeting provided a report showing all of the traffic incidents right around that area. And there was significantly more than 4 or 5 incidents. And as was highlighted again tonight, these streets are extremely narrow. During the applicant presentation, they mentioned that the streets were 22 feet wide in 3 of the 5 areas that they measured. Well, that means 40% of it's less than 22 feet wide. They're measuring around 20.5 feet others. Those are narrow streets that we're adding several more cars. And not just cars, it's gonna be trucks and delivery vehicles. You get a DJ, they're gonna have a vehicle with additional equipment. These are bigger vehicles that are gonna be there. And there's gonna be people driving, possibly after drinking that night. Again, causing more and more risk to the neighbors in the area. They did mention tonight that there's gonna be a holding tank for the fire pump. We do want to take time to take a look at that, make sure that that's gonna be sufficient to protect the building. Previously, it was gonna be the well that was gonna provide for the fire suppression, which we all knew would not have been sufficient, so they addressed that somewhat, but we want to take some time to review the size of that suppression system, the well that'll be there, and how reasonably safe that holding tank will be to provide for that building facility. Finally, for a special permit, you do need to comply with certain things in the regulations that they continue to not do. If you look at chapter 7 of your regulations, one of the first things it talked about is that provide for these special permits, you need to take into consideration the public health, safety, and general welfare, section 700. Well, the public health, safety, and general welfare of the neighbors is not being taken into consideration if this gets approved. This is going to be a significant facility with events close to these neighbors' properties and going to be detrimental to their health, and given the safety concern with the roads, going to be detrimental to their safety and general welfare as well. Second, 701.1 states that the proposed use is in general accordance with relevant provisions of the plan of conservation and development. That was highlighted a few weeks ago. The plan of conservation and development promotes preserving farm and farming activities. This is taking farmland and paving it, creating a party facility. This is not promoting what the plan of conservation and development encourages. 701.2, harmony with the area. States that the proposed use shall be of such location, size, and character that in general, it will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the area which is proposed. It will not be detrimental to the orderly development of adjacent properties. As we're building this event facility right by these residential properties, it's not in harmony with the area. This is all residents around there, and we are now creating this massive event facility right next door to them. It goes on to state that the kind, size, location, and height of the structure will not hinder or discourage the appropriate use of adjoining property or diminish the value thereof. The kind of structure that is being proposed and used here, the use of this kind of structure, is gonna hurt the adjoining property and diminish the value of those properties. Who is gonna wanna buy a house right next door to an event facility that can regularly host 250 people within 80 feet of your property line? Goes on to state, section 701.1.2 still, that the proposed use will not alter the essential characteristics of the area or adversely affect property value in the neighborhood. Well, it's clearly gonna adversely affect the characteristics of the area. Right now, we're not hosting 250-person events there on a regular basis. And these neighbors, these residential properties are going to be adversely affected. That's going to include the traffic up and down the street, not just the immediate neighborhood, but that whole general area will be affected by the traffic and the noise. Again, one side has no soundproofing. Those doors, whatnot, that noise is coming out of there. That's adversely affecting the neighborhood. The regulations go on 701.3 to provide for adequate access. States that the streets providing access to proposed use are adequate in width, grade, alignment, and visibility, and have adequate capacity for the additional traffic generated by proposed use. We're looking at significantly more cars in a condensed time frame on these streets. It's not going to be 88 to 100 cars over the course of a day necessarily. It's going to be 88 to 100 cars all at one time coming and going if you have some of these events. These streets in that area are very narrow, they're windy, they're dark. They're not adequate to host this sort of traffic in this sort of event facility. As Attorney Nealman discussed a few weeks ago, the fire apparatus will have this difficulty getting through here as well and turning into this. And the proposed use is not easily accessible for that fire apparatus, especially given the number of cars that are already parked in that facility in the event there is a fire. 701.4 refers to adequate infrastructure, which is required for a special permit. The water supply, sewage disposal, and stormwater drainage systems shall conform with accepted engineering criteria with all standards of the appropriate regulated authority. We discussed it at length last time the attorney was here. Again tonight, stormwater drainage system is a problem. They've not taken into account what is coming from across the street. They've acknowledged that they've not taken into account tonight. They feel they don't need to. Well, they do. It's running through that property. And the water supply issue, again, with respect to the fire apparatus, especially, it's still a concern, but we'll review what they proposed tonight. 701.5, that the proposed plans have provided for the conservation of natural features, drainage basins, and the protection of the environment in the area. So the proposed plans have not done that. we're paving significant portion of the ground here, and cause more water runoff, more pollution. And yes, we do think that that pollution from those cars, and from all the parking there, is gonna run down to the Scandic River and affect neighboring properties. And with, again, there's gonna be water runoff into several neighbors' properties. 701.6, compatible design. The proposed development is appropriate with the overall character of the community, as outlined in the plan of conservation development. Well, this community right now is primarily a residential community around this facility. This is not an appropriate use to add such a significant event facility. And again, 701.7 states that the proposed use will not have detrimental effect on the public health, safety, welfare, and convenience, welfare, convenience, and property values. Addressed this already. This event facility will detrimentally affect these things. 701.8. That in the case of any use located directly adjacent to a residential zone, the proposed use of the proposed activities will not hinder or discourage the appropriate use or development of adjacent land and buildings, or impair the value thereof after considering the location, size of proposed use, the nature and intensity of the operation involved, and the site layout in relation to the streets. This facility will have this detrimental impact on the residences around it. So we remain, my clients in our office remain concerned that this proposed use is non-compliant with the regulations of the town of East Windsor. And we don't want to see this treasured farmland and other farmland around this town become banquet halls, become event facilities like this, become parking lots where 250 guests have the ability to park. What other farmland will happen to next? And again, we look at this proposal and we see throughout their site plan capped for future expansion on all the utilities, on all the drainage lines. This is step one. This is step one. And they talked about how they want to preserve future farmland and use this money to help preserve future farmland. Well, doesn't take an economic expert to let you know. The money they're investing in this could be invested in preserving farmland and could go a long way, it could last a long time in preserving and supporting a lot of farms and farmland in the area. Simply put, this is just not in the right location. A facility of this size in East Windsor would make sense on Route 5, parts of 140. Those make sense. But around the Scandic Cemetery Road, that does not make sense. It's a quiet, primarily residential area. And we don't want facilities and event halls such as this happening there. Thank you all for listening. We do want to take time to look at what was proposed tonight, additional information, and we can respond to that. Hopefully next public hearing. Thank you all.
Is there anyone else would like to speak?
Hi, good evening, Tyler Nets, 9 Cemetery Road. Throughout these months, we've heard a lot of talk about conservation, preservation, and what the applicants have done over the years, which they've done a lot of that. Turning this property and this land into a paved parking lot, I don't feel preserves or conserves anything. The other concern, which I have myself, my family, our neighbors, and anybody in this immediate area is exposure. Over the course of a year, we are now exposed to thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people who now know where we all live. And we moved out here for privacy, for the quiet. And, I can't say that those thousands or tens of thousands of people are going to all be upstanding citizens. So just a concern of mine for safety. and exposure. And I just kind of wanted to bring that to light to you. Thank you.
Sir?
Michael Smith, 168 Tromley Road. My wife and my daughter moved here. She's 10. We moved here about a year ago from the Springfield area, and we moved here to get away from, get some quiet, some peace, family area. And when I heard about this, and we live pretty much eyesight from where this is being proposed, and we try to walk down there with our dog. It's narrow streets, as you know. It's hard to walk on these streets. I've lived all over the country, and I've never seen such windy, dark roads, which I kind of like when you're trying to get away from it all. But when you're talking about 250 people and 88 parking spaces, or it doesn't make sense. I'm also a wedding drummer. So I've done a lot of weddings. This is obviously going to be mostly a wedding event, in my opinion. And I don't see how most cars are 1 to 2 people in a car. And I don't see how it's going to be. You're going to have people having to park on the streets, park on the roads, the narrow roads, which are dark, unlit. And, we sit out on our steps a lot, and we watch the cars come by. There's, as you know, there's large trees that are right next to the roads. As you know, there's telephone poles that are right next to the roads, that if you even go to pick up your cell phone or do a text, you could almost hit a tree and the other thing is them having alcohol. And I can't imagine with the families around where we live, children, and that you're gonna have alcohol and people driving drunk down these dark, windy roads who don't know the area. And they're gonna be coming down Tromley, they're gonna be coming off the highway. That's the way that most of them are gonna get there. So as a new resident, it would definitely be detrimental as far as our future here if this place. And I know for many other families, it would be as well. So, thank you.
Mike Greer, 141 Scannick Road. What I wanted to say that where I live is right across from the whole place, and it's wet over there. But at the same time, I can hear my neighbors. I have animals, they have animals. I can hear them talking when the wind's, in a certain way, and I can hear them as plain as day. What's the noise level going to do if there's a band playing in there? So that's all I have to say.
Yes.
Christine Braun, 16 Mahoney Road. I wrote an email today because I'm not really comfortable speaking in public, but you know what? I don't argue that the building's beautiful. It's gorgeous. Bottom line is, it doesn't belong here. If I were them, I would be absolutely distraught because you work all week long, you work hard, you create a sanctuary, you come home, you want peace, as that gentleman stated, and they're going to have strangers, hundreds of strangers, cars, noise. It would completely alter their lives, their peace. And I think it's a terrible idea. Mr. Ursary, yes, clay town, clay soil, impervious, absolutely. That said, cars leaking oil, cars leaking coolant. Where's that all gonna go? Where is it gonna go? It all washes off, salt, sand, for safety in the winter. Where is it all gonna go when they clean the parking lots? And when we get 2 to 4 inches of rain, didn't that just happen last week? It happens more and more now. I think it's a terrible idea. It's beautiful, but it doesn't belong there. I believe that. with all my heart. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gary Roy, 235 South Main Street. I gotta say, for one thing, since they took over ownership of the property, they cleaned it up 100%. Right, and that's a big plus. They fixed the construction, they fixed some of the structural supports and everything on those buildings already, so they've cleaned those up already. If you look at, you're never gonna make everybody happy when something like this comes to anybody's town. But for me, I'm a member of this historical society, I'm a member of the East Hartford. I associate with the South Windsor, Manchester, and other ones. Our biggest problem is that none of them are active like East Windsor. If you go to any historical society, almost in the state, everybody's talking about what East Windsor has done over the years. They've brought other structures here. They've supported the history of this town. Other towns are going out of business. This one is going forward. Now, this facility, everybody seems to think it's going to be used for banquets and parties and bands. I see it used for me to go over and do lectures about some of the history of this town. You find other historical societies say, once this thing is open, we'd love to come over there and do lectures. Cemetery lectures, World War I veterans, World War II veterans, Civil War. There's a lot of lectures and working with other historical societies in the state that this facility be perfect for. I don't think it's gonna be, I'll be honest with you. Maybe 25% of the time, maybe at its max, it's gonna be used for some kind of facility that has music. I have anniversary parties for my parents during the 90s. I don't have a band, I don't have a DJ, it's all family. Birthday parties for people 67 years old. I go to them without music, it's about family. And I know there was some concern about car shows. I'll be honest with you, I've been doing car shows and motorcycle shows all over the state. I've been going to them for 20-some years. You can never plan to have 250, 75 cars, 100 cars. It gets out of control. More people show up than you ever imagine. You can never predict anything like that. And to be honest with you, I grew up in this town. I still own property here, so I'm connected here for over 50 years. I remember when the Scandic Church had services on Sundays, people were parking down Cemetery Road on the corner, on the edge of the streets. Now, when they do events, where do people park? Edge of the streets. When they do their Christmas bazaars, way more than 50, 100, 200 people there. They're parking down the street on each corner, all over the place. So, I mean, really, they're getting people, they want to get people off the street, put them in the parking lot. Unfortunately, you can't predict how many people come to something. You can only try to prepare the best you can. If the town says you need X amount of parking spots, that's what you prepare. Right? I think it's a great idea. I think it's going to keep the history of this town going. And I think right now, talking to other historical societies, they're all talking about this and how wonderful this is going to be to join in with other historical societies all over the state to come here and work with these people, because they're way up here. Most of them either down here or out of business. They're all trying to learn what's going on here in this town. So think about that. I mean, they want to move forward. Work with other groups, not all about parties. And somebody talked about the decibel level. I can have an emergency generator put in my house. It's going to be over 50 decibels and it's going to be right next to my neighbor. What can you do about it? Nothing. You can allow portable generators at house, emergency generators. They're over 50 decibels. That's next to each other. This is behind trees, behind a fence, inside a building. But that's below through concerns of the one living way in the back. You can get the highest decibel level generator you can get, 110, 75 decibels. Walk back there and find out how far you can go before you don't hear anything. That's quite a ways. You only get maybe less than 100 feet. You're not going to hear that. Thank you.
Robin Chesky, 102 Reservoir Avenue.
I think many of us admire the work that these historical society members have done over the years, and I do want to commend them. However, what they're proposing is a commercial enterprise. They're proposing a commercial enterprise with residents surrounding the area. That's not in harmony as far as I'm concerned. A couple of things that I think really highlight how it's not in harmony. They're gonna have to have parking lot lights. Those lights, 12, 20, they can be as high as 35 feet. Those are commercial lights. These people are gonna be having those lights shining in their homes, 11, 12 o'clock at night. They're not gonna shut off. And there's no way that they can close that light out if it's beaming down. These mitigation strategies that they're putting forward are arborvitaes that are 10 feet, a berm, a wall. But the light is gonna shine like that into their yards and into their homes. That hasn't really been brought up, and I think it's an important point. The other thing is, they're on wells. Many of us are on wells. And you have a commercial facility, I'm gonna get into a little math, 250 people. You have everyone flushes once at the minimum. That's 1.6 gallons. You can have 400 gallons of water coming out of the well in one night. Say you have three big events over the weekend. We can just say that you might actually see over 1,200 gallons of water being drawn off their well, which is going to affect others' wells. I mean, I'm imagining these homes are older and they probably have very shallow wells. Just think about what that's going to do. Plus, the fact that they have all these parking lots where the water used to actually be able to sink into the ground. That ability is no longer there. So what is that in itself going to do with these folks' wells? I think the other thing is to snow removal. Let's just say they have a brunch on Sunday morning, starting at 11 o'clock, and you get a snowstorm. They're gonna have the trucks with the lights and the backing up and the beep, 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 coming in early on a Sunday morning to get that snow out there. We also have Cemetery Road, which, what is the town going to have to do? They're gonna have to, the Department of Public Works will have to go out of their way to get that road ready for all those people to come in. So this is a nonprofit organization that is actually going to be costing our resources, town resources, because now we're going to have to make sure during the snowy time of the year, that we are making it safe for attendees to get onto their property from our roads. I think that's going to be an issue. I think just the noise from the trucks backing up their lights, beeping, clearing snow. I think for the residents, it's really going to be a nuisance. It will not, and I think it definitely will not be in harmony with what they expect to have when they go to their homes. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I would like to. Number one, the parking.
I'm sorry, please identify yourself.
Nancy Masters, Bradstreet. The parking is in a valley. It's down here, quite low. This sits up quite a bit higher. I don't think the lights in the parking lot down here are gonna affect the residents here or the residents there. That's just knowing the lay of the land. I've been involved with the Scout Hall for 22 years. I mentioned that last time. We have rented out Friday, Saturday, and Sunday almost every single weekend on a road the exact same size as this is. We have houses right on either side, plus we have all the soccer fields right behind us, which also bring in probably another 75 to 100 cars on top of if we have enough. I don't think I've ever seen a traffic jam on the road for the Scout Hall or for the soccer fields all at one time with residents all up and down the road. I'm just saying we have been able to run Scout Hall 0 incidents for that many years. Same people there are the same people at the Historical Society. We have rules, we have regulations. Events will end at 10 o'clock at night. We are not going to 11 o'clock. We're not going to 12 o'clock. So those are just some of the things that were brought up tonight that we've already addressed. We have a whole system of filling out applications, large security deposits. So if you don't end at 10 o'clock, if your music is more than so many decibels, cha-ching, we just take out from your deposit. And it has worked that way at Scout Hall very successfully.
Hi, my name is Angela Bevan. I live at 121 Scannick Road. This is very difficult for me to do. I'm not a speaker whatsoever, but I feel in my heart that you all need to know what's going on. The barn, the blue barn, is directly in back of our home. Okay. We're not affected, not only in our backyard, but in the front yard as well. Okay, we moved here 16 years ago for this to be our retirement home, our happy place. We loved it. Why? Because of my mom. It had an in-law for her. It's a quiet and peaceful, beautiful place, farmland behind us. That's why we thought it was so country. We moved here. You would think that after 16 years later, somebody would want to put in a wedding facility event doing this to us. And I need to let you know too, my mom is 92 years old and she lives with several health issues, which I will not get into because, you know, that's not necessary, but she does have a fractured hip for 2 years that they can't operate on. And she has spinal stenosis. So she is limited to where she can go from her chair in the living room to the bed in the bedroom. And that's with assistance from me, my sister, or nursing home. And she's not able to go outside anymore. I just want you to know. And the last time that I was outside with my mom, she looked and said, how peaceful and private it is here. She said, neighbors can't see us on the right, neighbors can't see us on the left. And all we have is this big blue barn behind us, and no one's gonna move in there. Oh boy, Mom, huh? Oh boy. Now for her to enjoy the outdoors, she can't go there anymore. We have to open her windows, which faces directly to the blue barn behind us. Okay? And then she keeps her shades open so she can enjoy the outdoors because we can't bring her outdoors anymore. So we bring the outdoors into her. That's just not fair. I don't think that's right. How a person should spend that last chapter of their lives like that because of other people not being, you know, considerate of us. And if you approve of this, this is going to affect her dramatically, okay? She goes to bed early. She says the events will end at 10 o'clock. My mom goes to bed at 9 o'clock, if not earlier, because she has problems sleeping. She can't sleep on her side, her right side. So I have to help her. And then in times that she can't sleep, she'll sleep in her recliner, her electric recliners. And I'm telling you, it's just very difficult. And now we have to close, if they do this event, the windows. And we have to pull her shades down because that's what all she has left out. To see, look outside, to see the birds go on our berry trees, to hear peacefulness, okay? And now what she's gonna be hearing is noise from generators, vendors' trucks, keeping the food cold. And that's no way for her to live the final chapter of her life. I can't see that. That woman gave so much. And if this goes on, if you do accept it, what's gonna happen is the construction. There's gonna be noise. There's gonna be dumpsters, trucks coming, dropping off loads of equipment for the parking lot. And just to make the Blue Barn a wedding facility event. And how long will it take for them to do this? How long? It's not gonna take weeks, months, maybe possibly years. So she's gotta be subject to these noise coming. That's before even the event takes place. And that's unconscionable. I cannot see that for a person of that age to go through this, or even us, my husband and I who worked so many years, so hard to get where we are, for, like I said, my happy place, my retirement home. I can't believe this for selfishness, and it's just, like I said, I just can't believe this. So I'm asking you on the behalf of my mom, my husband, our neighbors in the community who signed, and my husband and Gail went to each person, they didn't just put a sign on the properties. They asked and told them what's going on, and they agreed with us. We couldn't have put the signs out without their permission and their feeling for us. So, and I also want to say, I don't want to take up too much more time, and that is the most important thing, is for our standard of life is going to be changed. Is going to be changed, Nancy. And I just can't see that's just uncalled for. But also, you need to know too, I'm known as the lady with the beautiful flowers at the end of her driveway, okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so the flowers are my escape from the hustle and the bustle of the real world. I was happy to discover that the joy that it brought my gardening, not only to me, but my neighbors, the people coming by, the smiles, the thumbs up I got from the community, that felt unbelievably well. So that's a double whammy, how rewarding for me, okay? But, you know, I can't do it much longer. It's gonna be too risky with the cars coming up and down the road. It's just, and if I could share with you, 2 weeks ago, a vehicle hit. We have a long stone barrier in front of our property. And for them to hit it, they had quite an impact. So could you imagine if I was out there in the road doing my flowers, what could have happened to me? Okay, not only that, but this is a fact. There was a woman that crashed on our property, her car. She hit the tree by Gail's house. And what did they do? They had to cut her out of the car. That's how bad it was. So again, oh, it's not a big deal. Or the traffic, or the roads, the width or whatever, it makes a difference. And that's not just once, but twice. It happened to us. And then with Gail Boisford, her house, just about a month ago. In the evening, we had to call the police department because we heard a lot of racket and screeching and everything. And I was so concerned, I told my husband, Rich, wake up, what's going on? So we called the police department. Somebody was drunk. They ran over her bushes. They threw all their stuff out of their car onto her property, and then they took off. So could you imagine if one of us was coming home late at night? And no, if you're gonna have this event, what's gonna be going around this neighborhood, these small roads? It's just, that's just uncalled for. So, you can understand my family's fear for me working on my flowers at the end of the driveway and say, no, Ron, please don't be doing this anymore. I'll do because of this wedding event that happened. It's taken away so much from my husband, my mom, and me, and our community. And they feel the same way too. They wouldn't be signing. They wouldn't be signing. We're not just putting signs up for nothing. And I just got to tell you, I appreciate you. And I thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to share through our eyes, where we're sitting in our kitchen, what we're seeing. Because when we look out our window, that's why we bought the house too. It's my husband and I looked over at the fields and said, how beautiful, this is gorgeous. Oh, look at how lucky we are. Now I'm gonna feel like uncomfortable sitting at my table, drinking coffee, and there's people having events behind us. What's gonna stop them from looking over into our kitchen and saying, oh, well, geez, I wonder what's going on over there. Oh, well, you know, so it's just, we lost our privacy. What, now I have to do my shades down? That was one of the things we loved about our house, having the shades open, having the windows open, walking out on our porch, and it's only 80 feet from our property. That's uncalled for, and I can't see. I mean, I appreciate the Historic Society, what they do for the community, their ice cream social, once a year, fine, beautiful, fantastic. But don't be bringing this into our backyard and changing our lives and making it difficult for all of us. I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Hi, Christina Gala, 102 Reservoir Road. Good evening, commission members. Once again, up here supporting the people of the Scantic area. I want to thank the Historical Society for their hard work with the museums on the green. It really is, you know, a nice place to visit in East Windsor. My questions about observation should not be taken away from what you've created. I do feel that their current proposal is not in harmony with the surrounding neighborhood. I worry about the health and safety of those living nearby, and the lack of infrastructure to support this event center. Before I go into any other details, I want to say that, one thing with the lights is, we have to be aware not just of the parking, but there are lights on the backside of the building. And there are also parking lights on the small parking lots. So, that is a concern, that Nancy kind of just said that the parking lot was delayed, but there are some other parking lights. As I reviewed the site plans and looked at surrounding homes in the Scantic Historical Village District, I was unable to find any commercial buildings that are as large as what is being proposed for the event hosting and surrounded by residential homes. Now, remember, this was a horse barn. It was not an event center. So they're taking a horse barn and converting it now into a big event center. The homeowners in the area, they try to sell their property, they're gonna see a decrease in value. As people have stated, nobody's gonna wanna have that. It's literally in their backyard. I mean, I know we don't like to use that term, but their backyard is the event center. And that just, to me, if that was myself, I don't even know what I would do. I would be upset every single day knowing that I have to go out and that would be in my backyard. And that's not what I tried hard through my life to get a nice quiet home. The quiet farmland near them is going to be converted into this huge event hosting, rental, and banquet center. I was a little concerned when we're talking a little bit about the zoning and that the adjacent neighbors are really the only ones affected. The adjacent neighbors are part of the neighborhood. The people down the street, it was said, well, they won't really be affected by the traffic. They won't be affected by anything. The adjacent neighbors are part of that neighborhood. As Gail went out and put out signs and talked to neighbors, those are our neighbors. So we can't, even if 3 people or 3 homes will be affected more than other people in the neighborhood, they are part of the neighborhood. They make up that district. I think we need to keep that in mind. I asked what will be the better standard of living during the construction of the facility. The last woman who spoke, who lives right next door, and it will be in her backyard. Asked, how long is this gonna take? The impact of dust and noise in the neighborhood, big trucks driving in and out, it's gonna impact them all. It's gonna be a lot on them. This was briefly mentioned, but really hasn't been talked about, but there are no sidewalks or shoulders on the road. I could see if someone's having a wedding, that maybe they'll use the church across the street. And the Stokel Society will host the reception. And will the people leave the cars at the church? And how will they get over there safely? They might say, hey, I'll just leave my car here. It's easier to just walk over. Why should I drive? Even though there may be adequate parking. But it's a tricky intersection. There's no sidewalks. And currently, pedestrian deaths are up in our state. In fact, West Hartford just recently had 3 in a week. 3 hit by vehicles. So we can't say that it's not going to happen. There's another item that came up and has kind of been lost in the presentation, but there was mention of geothermal heating. I'm not sure if this is still being proposed at the site. But we should actually know if it is, because there's open loop systems which utilize water, which could be from a current well source site. That water would be pulled from the aquifer, from the well, and then it's going to be discharged somewhere else on the property, potentially, for one of the type systems. There's also closed loop, so which doesn't use well water, but we don't know because it hasn't been discussed. Is it going to be installed vertically or horizontally? Because it's depending on how much land it's going to take up. What are the disruptions when they go to put in the geothermal? Is it gonna disrupt other wells in the area? They're gonna have to drill. I mean, just known factor. And remember, this is a commercial building. It's not a residence. This is almost a 9,000 square foot building. So it's gonna be a pretty big system. It's gonna be geothermal. If it's gonna utilize water from the aquifer, we should know that. And we should know how much noise is gonna be associated with the construction of it. This different information hasn't been presented. It's a concern for public health and safety, everyone in the area. My water comes from the aquifer and I'm on reservoir, but if people are drawing from the aquifer, I mean, as a commercial operation, I mean, that's a concern. I mean, most big commercial facilities are on the public water supply. This will not. This is being drawn from the aquifer, from a private well. So it's a concern for all of us in town. During the last presentation of the traffic study, it was stated the estimate for deliveries per day would be about 20 deliveries. The potential for more than one delivery to happen at a time is very high if it's going to be an event. This will leave trucks and cars idling behind the residential homes. I did get the fire marshal's drawing. And he had posted that there'd be no parking behind that barn. Where the homeowners' homes would be. But it still concerns me that if you have 20 deliveries and it's going to take a while to get these items in and out of the cars, people are going to shut off their car. Those fumes and exhaust are just going to be floating over the fence into the homeowners' yards. And sitting outside, maybe they're enjoying a nice cocktail on the weekend, and next thing you know, they're smelling gasoline fumes or diesel fumes or whoever's delivering. It's detrimental to your health. I mean, nobody wants to be exposed to that. We talked about the dumpster, the trash removal, and the attorney mentioned that you can't really block it with parking. I did notice there is a gravel road that goes over towards the dumpster too. I guess my concern is if they decide they want to drive that way, the dust and the dirt is going to be kicked up, and that's going to float into the neighbors' properties as well. There's no way a fence or trees is going to block that. And if they start using the buildings behind those other barns that are proposed on the property, there's 3 other barns for any other storage. I mean, they're going to be driving on those gravel roads, so that's going to kick up a lot of dirt. So this goes on to the unenforceable noise ordinance. There's been a lot of debate in our town about the ordinance, in which, as far as I know, we don't have one. So if there is noise, how does someone complain? Because we don't have an ordinance. So the burden falls to the neighborhood and the people living there. And this shows that it's not in harmony. Because if it's noisy, Nancy in the Historical Society, she had stated that they're going to collect a fee if they're noisy. But that's no help to the people living there when it's noisy. I mean, they're going to have to call the police. The police are going to come over. They might say, okay, well, it seems like it's noisy, but we can't do anything about it. There's no noise ordinance. And no, it's been there, done it. So it's a real concern. I mean, I live on Reservoir. I live at the far end out east. I'm 1 mile away from the park. And when they have the summer conference series, I can sit on my porch and hear it clear as day. Every single song, words, everything. So when you say that those sliding doors in the front will not project noise anywhere when they're open, person on the hill will hear it. People on Cemetery will hear it. People on Scantic Road will hear it. Noise travel. And we all have to remember that at dusk, it's a known fact that sound actually travels farther. So even if they have an event going to 10 o'clock, once dusk comes, that sound's going to travel farther. And there's going to be people around that are going to be able to hear the noise. Dale had mentioned about open sleeping. or open window sleeping and how this is gonna impact the neighbors. I look at it of when does it actually approach a nuisance condition? When it'll directly affect the health and welfare of the neighbors. It's really frustrating to me that they would have to be the ones burdened with, being the ones to, manage the noise levels and make a complaint if that happens. One thing I wanted to mention was, I know the attorney brought up the, radius. I didn't get whatever was passed out recently and what their hurting radius plan was. But I did get the plan from the fire marshal in which there was 4 different areas where there needed to be 26 feet of width. One of them happened to be the parking lot, where it looks like probably 10 spaces would need to be eliminated. In order for the fire truck to get and turn there. One thing I do know is that I actually dispatched with the police department and fire department. I do know when you're responding to a fire incident, you're not going to want to worry about, should I back up and turn? You need to get in and be able to turn with no cars in the way, no buildings, nothing, no trees to worry about. I mean, you're protecting health and safety. I mean, so I don't know what their plan was and how they're revised that. But currently I see that it's an issue for the trucks to get in here and be able to fight this fire at this building in a quick manner. I mean, you can't afford to waste time backing up and trying to get in. So don't worry, I'm getting down there. The current plans, as mentioned by our attorney, show future expansion. We have not yet heard what these expansions will be. This concerns me. Last time I spoke, I had located an article where I had mentioned that Nancy Masters had said the sky's the limit. That to me tells me that if they want to expand, whatever they can do, they will do it. I located another article, July 28th, 2018 in the JI with an interview with Nancy Masters. And the question was, this is the campus of the East Windsor Historical Society Museums on the Green. She answered yes. If you look over here, we purchased 40 acres of land behind here, including all the barns. Question, they look like horse barns now. Answer, they are. But they can become event barns. They can become event barns. This is the second article that I've located that mentioned further development of the property. How much expansion is planned? Will all the barns become event centers? Maybe one will become a brewery. Maybe one will become a winery. I don't know. Will the property across the street become parking or more expansion? We don't know. But it is on the plans. So in conclusion, the current proposal currently doesn't fit, nor is harmonious within the district. And either will further expansion be. I encourage the commission to carefully review the zoning and not only think about it in the perspective of the applicant, but also in the perspective of all the abutters and how it will affect their lives. One of the biggest investments that people have is their homes. It is a place to relax, enjoy, unwind, entertain, and call their own. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Save mine for next meeting.
Okay, our Zoom audience, is there anybody online that would like to make a comment? I'll take that as a no. Okay, is there anything else you would like to add?
Well, we're looking at the time, there is certainly some comments here by some of the neighbors that deserve being addressed and we can address them. There was some comments made by the attorney, that we need to address and give him some clarification. But seeing as I'm assuming we're going to continue and keep the hearing open and it's 9 p.m. and there's a lot of information that you've received. I think we can hold off until your next meeting, if that suffices for everyone else.
I agree.
Thank you, Jay. That was a yes, no question.
Okay.
Can I just make sure a few things get into the record?
Sure.
Okay, we heard from Christine Braun. She sent an email today summarizing her thoughts. That'll be posted online and in your next packet. We also have, I printed off the meeting minutes of the police commission, where they took a look at the proposal, the traffic authority.
Excuse me, can you be quiet, please? We're still continuing our meeting. Thank you.
Chairman Leach said the traffic study for Scantic Road was thorough and sees no issue. The other commissioners agreed it was very clear and they had no questions or issues. And then I did receive the latest notice for this meeting. And then just for point of clarification, the fire marshal's comments, he and I met and talked through the writing on this plan is mine, circling, okay, you're talking, you need a turning radius. The circles in no way say removing parking spaces or anything like that. That was just me saying, this is an area you have an issue with, you need 26-foot turning radius. And I believe scrolling through the plans that were just submitted, modifications have been made to address those comments. I just want to make sure all that got on the record.
Well, I think everybody's in agreement that there's a lot of new information that needs to be digested and looked through, so we're not in a position to close the public hearing yet, so
That's a shame.
I would like to entertain the proposal to continue the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to continue the public hearing on PZ 2022-26, 115 Scantic Road, a special use permit for event hosting until our next meeting, which is January 10th, 2023.
Here. Okay, so there was a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. The public hearing will be continued until our next meeting in January 10th. Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you. This meeting still going.
Yes, we have a plan, which we saw on our agenda. Okay, so we have no new public hearings. No new business. So. Yeah. So under other business, maybe.
Crawls, because the property has the whole parcel slated as B2. There's. She owns. Right now. She owns from South Main Street back. This back parcel down to the river has been being farmed. Now, for as long as she knows. There's barn on the property, which they indicated here. So she came in during tax, she found and, the property card and her as a deed.
So what lands?
It's down in the floodplain, yeah, it's all, and, so there's about 4.5 acres of it falls in the B2 zone. And so
This part is B2.
we're at the pink.
That part.
Oh, so this large parcel here is in what's in question. She would like to change that to ag, to have this whole parcel be ag. It's actually, you know where it drops off on South Main? That's where that is.
That-
The drop off.
That building's a barn, I assume.
That's a barn, the fields are.
That's the consumer's problem.
Well, the question here is if we change this to ag, this becomes a landlocked piece of property, then she has no access to it without going through.
Well, she doesn't have access to it now without going through something.
But
Are
Because that's not property line, that's just.
Oh,
So what I'm saying, these are on the MLS as 3 separate properties.
Yeah.
So this is a landlocked piece of property current.
And I believe it gets access. I don't know if it gets access.
Is there no easement or anything like that? Rick?
There has to be, because you
Yeah.
can't landlock.
Landlocked
parcels.
What I'm saying is,
have a need in someplace.
This wouldn't be landlocking it, it's just, it's taking what is currently here
There's no such thing as.
and turning these.
well, my concern or question is then, so does the easement have to be in the same zone as the property? Or it doesn't matter that it's an easement?
I don't
through
think
the
it does.
B2?
Mike and I were just talking about that, as someone brought it up with regard to something else that's in the works, should be.
For taxes.
Taxes.
Okay.
But legally, there's no such thing as landlocked property, legally.
So there has to be an existing easement.
There has to
I
be.
mean, they're getting down there to.
Right.
They're getting down there to farm.
Well, I mean, currently it's showing multiple properties, but since it's zoned, or I mean, since they're individual properties, there's nothing to prohibit her from selling this one B2 property and then landlocking that property.
They're contiguous parcels. If they're separate parcels, then it wouldn't. They could, sell them separately, but
But
it
then-
still can't be
so then-
landlocked.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So there may not be an existing easement, but if this property were to sell, then it have to be included.
Because if that person had the right to go through it, they couldn't sell the parcel and just say, now you can't get to where you were talking.
Yeah, right.
But this is just making the use consistent based upon the
Yeah, I mean-
designation.
I think the zoning map was kind of trying to draw a straight line. I don't even
Well, I figured
know why even get this little
some distance back,
jog there. Is that because of the?
and I thought about that too, like the next go around with the same conservation and development. Think about
That zoning line should follow property lines, yeah.
something like, shouldn't it follow that drop off?
Yeah.
Like,
If somebody owns a piece of property with multiple zones, can they have multiple uses on that same piece of property? So by us taking, if we took that approach of changing all zoning lines to follow property lines, we could adversely affect somebody that way too, saying that I've got multiple uses because of that zoning line running through my property.
If you were going in the direction of being more restrictive, but if you
Right.
took the zone that was less restrictive, like we've done on some of the T
Well,
five
if
stuff.
if that were the case, then that would then turn around and because that had a little piece of pink, could turn this all into pink then if that was.
But you would.
Yeah.
In the flood.
Yeah, it's all from the plan. Yeah, that would.
Smith it to make it.
Yeah.
Because if this is less restrictive, you know, that's not.
Well, Chester.
And like that parcel is so restricted by flood, this could never do anything else.
Yeah.
through there.
All right, so she would have to come and request the zone change? Is that what she's gonna have to do?
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't sure it was something that should be department.
In-house?
sponsored. Yeah, not
I mean,
do it in-house, but it would be a town.
Administrative thing, you know.
Bring it to you, but
Because it's gonna be a public
Oh.
hearing.
Yeah,
Well, the town brings it, what's the benefit in the town?
Nothing, we get less taxes.
Yeah, exactly. So I think to put the onus on the property owner, the request that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just thought it, I saw it as a, should we be thinking about where the zones? The zone borders are. A little more.
But that would be not just this one property.
Oh, gosh,
It would be all
Yeah,
over.
it triggered. Yes. These universal thoughts. Okay,
Okay,
that's what I needed to hear.
that is all.
Thank you.
We have no other,
No, I think that's it.
okay.
right, give your motion.
Now we're gonna take motion to adjourn. I'm sorry, did I talk over you? I didn't hear.
Yeah, right.
There's a kind of motion to adjourn. I think it should be adjourned.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn. Seconded by Dave. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.
So every meeting,
Nine.
break that motion.
Nice.